All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Integrated Learning Conference. So this is very exciting for us that we kind of get to share some of the things that we've been doing to kind of work through this whole pandemic and all the challenges that it brings along with it. My name is Mike Stauffer, and I am the principal at the East Campus of the Berks Career and Technology Center, and also the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. With us today, we have Brett Adams, who's our Director of Information Technology, Kyle Fulweiler, who's our West Campus principal, and Michael Stein, who's one of our technology integration coaches, will also be joining us throughout the session. So good morning again and welcome. To kind of get us started, one of the things I want you to kind of think about is, if you think back to the late 80s and the early 90s, Apple had a logo and a slogan, "Think Different." And if we haven't had to do that over the last 9 or 10 months, we never have in education. We certainly moved into uncharted territory and have successfully navigated this challenge because we all had to work together and really collaborate and really share a lot of ideas like we've never had to do before. And going into this, we knew that we certainly had our work cut out for us. Over the course of the next hour or so, what we want to do is kind of share with you our journey and how the Berks Career and Technology Center continued to provide instruction to our students. This is by no means the only way. It's just simply how we solved this issue and how we approached it. And we're absolutely looking forward to learning from the many other presenters throughout the conference as far as how we can improve on what we're currently doing. So kind of getting into this and looking at this whole timeline. So I think we're all probably pretty shocked. We had started about maybe a week prior to March 13th, just kind of roughly planning what would this look like in the event we ever had to shut down. So we had some really rough drafts of a plan, and then on about 2:45 on Friday the 13th, our director came in, Dr. Kraft, and told us that we were closing, and everyone wasn't going to be allowed back in the buildings, and we had to kind of gather everything, and it was about 15 minutes before the end of the school day. So what we did was that whole weekend was spent kind of communicating back and forth with the admin team. And then we had met the following Monday. And then during that meeting the following Monday, what we began to do was really to start to lay out what are some of our goals? What would our plan be? What is, how are we going to assess students? What is the vision of this whole thing going to be? And if you remember, at the time, we were only looking at a 2-week closure. But we kind of were anticipating that this could go much longer. And we had 2 weeks that what we didn't want to do was lose that. And what we wanted to do was really take advantage of that. So as we kind of met as an admin team, we kind of laid out a vision amongst ourselves of kind of a rough idea of what this was going to be, started planning next steps, and then immediately the next day started reaching out to some of our staff members and trying to pull them in, because we knew if we could get them in, we could certainly get buy-in with this entire process. So we have some folks in our building that we refer to as Schoology champions. And these Schoology champions are really responsible for, kind of leading the charge with Schoology. They're the early adopters, the ones that jumped on and really kind of took the bull by the horns and really kind of pushed the limits of Schoology and what it could do and how we could integrate it into BCTC. So we pulled those folks in, started talking with them about some of our ideas, our ideas, and where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do with that. And also got a lot of feedback from them and a lot of ideas from them as far as how to approach this. So that very first week of that school closure was spent, really just kind of building out what the second week was going to look like. So moving into the second week, what we needed to do was start to identify what are some of our challenges. How much time are we going to need? Who is going to need to be trained? To what level are they going to need to be trained? Because we were also very aware, and again, with conversations to our Schoology champions, that we had users at all different levels as far as their comfortability with Schoology. And so what we started to do was break out what those levels look like. And we kind of had like a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced level. And then we assigned Schoology mentors to each one of those groups. And again, with the help of our instructional coaches, started to really formulate what that training was going to look like and really kind of targeted that professional development in the use of Schoology to the level of user, as we were going through with our professional development. So what we started to do then was pull everything together and start to set up what the format of the training was going to be. Now that we knew the content was going to be, now we had to get the format. And this was really our next big challenge. And I know Mr. Adams is going to talk about that in a little bit later, so I won't steal his thunder there. But we now were in an environment where we had staff that had just was not very adept at using technology. Really haven't had to do it before. While we were pushing and using Schoology and really had a 3-year plan laid out, so that at the end of 3 years, last year being year one, that we would have 100% of our staff fully adept at using Schoology, and all of their grading and assignments and everything would really be managed through that learning management system. But we knew that we weren't there yet. So the other issue that we had, we didn't have an opportunity to pull all the staff together and do this in person. We had to figure out a way to get folks training, get them access to training, get them access to professional development, and do all of that in a virtual environment. And that was a really big challenge that we really tackled pretty early on. And again, that was led by Mr. Adams and Mr. Stein there. And then as we were going through developing all of this, the other thing that we knew that we needed to do was we needed to have constant communication and monitoring this whole process along the way, and knew that we needed to be prepared to make changes. And we made many changes throughout along the way, and we're continuing to do that today. And I think that's really important to understand, is that it's not going to be an end all be all, and flexibility is absolutely going to be key. Communication is going to be key. Collaboration is going to be key, and really kind of checking your egos at the door and just making sure that you're really getting best practices and applying best practices. But did you want to jump to the next slide? So as we jumped into doing some of the planning, just to kind of break the steps down a little bit more, again, we talked about the Schoology champions already, and develop PD based on the needs assessment of the staff and their comfortability with Schoology. And I'll talk a little bit about our 3-year plan, but I'll give you a little more insight into that. So last year, one of our school improvement plans was to develop a 3-year plan that included integrating Schoology throughout the entire Berks Career and Technology Center within 3 years. And we were very methodical in how we laid that out. And last year was supposed to be all level 1 students would have all their content uploaded and using Schoology. The following year would be all level 2 students, and then we would be doing some grading with our level 1 students in Schoology. And then finally, the 3rd year, you'd have all your level 3s in there and would be fully adept at using grading features and all the different features associated with Schoology. So going into this pandemic, we were maybe halfway through year one. So there were still many staff that had not, really done a whole lot with Schoology. Everybody had some level of experience, but not a lot were using, using it to the level that we needed. We figured we were probably at about 50% or so of the staff that was fully adept at using Schoology at that point. And by the start of this school year, very happy to say that we absolutely hit 100%, and we've pretty much closed out that school improvement goal almost 1 year and 3/4 to 2 years earlier than expected. So that was one of the things that we wanted to lay out very early with that. So communicating the vision. So again, we first talked about having the implementation team in place. We wanted to make sure we continue to develop a top-notch education, which again is an incredible challenge for any school kind of being thrown into a virtual environment, let alone when you're in a CTE environment. It presents many other challenges that are very difficult to navigate sometimes. And we wanted to be very methodical in how we rolled this out. We knew that going into this, we're not going to be, just running training 1 week, and then we're not going to be running and delivering new content and virtual conference sessions and teaching everything synchronously with our classes. We knew we weren't going to be able to do that. So we wanted to be very methodical in how we rolled that out, and we'll get into what that looked like in a little bit. And then again, finally, one of the goals was improve the skills of all the staff. Sometimes, when you have a pandemic like this, there is a silver lining to that, and that silver lining for us has certainly been, it's caused us to it's really forced us to stretch ourselves and learn a lot of new things and a lot of new skills. And this is going to change the way that we deliver education forever in some way, shape, or form. So there is definitely a silver lining to this when you take a look at that. Brett, did you want to talk about some of the technology stuff?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Mike. So really, when we got into the planning, the technology capabilities and assessment was something that we really needed to focus on at the very beginning stages of everything with the pandemic, there was a quick turnaround. We knew that there was a possibility that we would not be able to get back into the building. So for our staff members, we knew we wanted to make sure that everybody had a device. There was people that were using desktops at school. We needed to dismantle some of our laptop carts, reconfigure them, and then hand them out to the right people. So we spent time meeting with certain people, at the front doors of the building, not even getting into the building, but just there to hand out devices. For our students, obviously we needed to make sure that they could still connect and make sure that they could do the work that was needed. So we actually we have 16 sending schools, and we relied on our 16 sending schools who are all one-to-one to provide the devices for those students. Obviously there were some things that had happened where we needed to provide a device here or there. And we did have, certain Chromebook carts and things like that that we could also dismantle to give to certain students. But the majority of that fell on the sending schools with their one-to-one programs. And that came with a couple challenges of its own, but again, we'll talk about that in the challenges section here in a couple slides. We also made sure that our students could connect and interact with our teachers. So we made sure before this had happened that all of our students have an Office 365 account. That gives them access to email. It gives them access to Word, Excel online, as well as a OneDrive account, so they can store files out there and share files with teachers and other students. And it also gives access to a program called Teams, which is what we were using as a collaboration platform. So our students and our teachers are able to interact on the Teams platform. Knowing that we were going to be, possibly out of the building, maybe back in, some of us out, we wanted to provide our instructors a way to still provide, meaningful quality education in a CTE environment. So to do that, we decided we were going to look into purchasing some high quality webcams, something that's going to interface very easily with the platforms that we use, whether it's Teams, whether it's a Schoology conference, or whether it might be Zoom or something else that we decided to use at any time. We wanted to have that flexibility. So we looked at different options, and what we decided on was a Logitech Brio camera. It's a standard webcam, but it's got 4K quality, excellent video and streaming capabilities. And what the benefit of that is that this instructors were able to have those cameras to record either sections of their lessons that they could then post into Schoology, or they could live stream classes. So it gave us that flexibility that the instructors would need in order to still be able to give meaningful instruction, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous. One thing that we needed to make sure that we had, and things that one of the things that I thought of was the tripods and stands that go along with these cameras is probably just as important as the cameras themselves. A standard tripod's not going to work in all situations in a CTE environment. So we bought a variety of different things. We have one type it's about a 2 foot long tripod that has a clip on it that I know have been used in multiple scenarios out in things like our auto tech area, where they can clip that webcam to the hood of a car and they can be working on the inside of a car and allow students, whether they're there or virtual, to be able to see what's going on within the engine area of that car. So that way they're getting the details as if they were standing right there next to the instructor. So that covers the devices. The internet access was another thing that we were concerned about. We did run some multiple tests to make sure that our internet was capable. We look back at trends as far as what we were, our total bandwidth versus what we were, using on a regular basis. And we determined at that point that we had enough bandwidth that we would be able to supply meaningful instruction without having any kind of major outages or maxing out bandwidth, things like that. Like I said, the Microsoft Office 365, it's a platform that we use for across the board for our students and our staff. So that gives us the ability to interact both on Teams, using email, things like that, on almost any device. So the students that are using their one-to-one school devices would also be able to use, a home device if they had to log on to get email or something like that if they're having an issue. And then the last thing on here is, we just wanted to plan to train our staff with Teams and Schoology. So at the very beginning, like Mike said earlier, it was difficult because we were just kind of, the doors were locked and were shut out of our building. So we couldn't get everybody together and do a mass training like an in-service or something like that. So really what we started to do was we decided that we were going to use Teams for our primary communication platform. And that was just so that way we had a means to connect with everybody. Everybody had access to it because everybody had the laptops or the mobile devices. They were able to then connect into Teams. It was just kind of, for some people, it was showing them Teams for the first time or being able to introduce that to them to at least get them into the team session so that they would be able to then communicate. That sounds funny now because, here we are 6-7 months later and everybody feels like they've been living in this virtual world. But at the time, there was people that had never done any kind of web conference or web chats or anything like that. So this was a big challenge. And one of the things that we've done, I think that has helped was we were able to create short videos kind of explaining little bits of each part of Teams. We put that out on our shared video section within Office 365, and people were able to go out and watch that. We tried to keep them as short as possible because obviously nobody wants to sit there and be watching a 45-minute video on how to, connect a video conference. So we kept it short. We kept it pointed towards the things that we needed to do. And then once they were able to connect and once they were able to watch those videos to get onto our team session, then we could do some more in-depth and more meaningful trainings because at that point, the groups would be together and we would be able to use that platform for that. Once we had the teams trainings together and we had the teams, people were more comfortable within Teams and to be able to get on there. That's when Mike Stein had taken over, our instructional coach, and our instructional technology coach, I'm sorry, and he was able to take Schoology and really kind of use Teams to explain Schoology and to show them where they needed to be within Schoology to, provide that same instruction and really kind of move forward with the Schoology trainings.
For Brett and Mike, there's a question in the chat. We have Teams and are in the process of integrating Schoology. We're still in the planning stages of how to use all the tools. What do you recommend for the use of Teams, and why would you recommend continuing to use Teams once Schoology is fully integrated? I know this is something that we certainly have worked through over the last few months. Would Brett and Mike, would you mind maybe addressing some of that?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of I'm sorry, this is Michael Stein, and the way that we use Schoology and then use the video conferencing tools within Schoology or using Teams and so forth actually varies depending upon the audience. We experienced a couple of different things that allowed us to kind of identify best case or best use scenarios for either product. Schoology has something built into it called conferences that you can use. And we typically will use that, at least at the very beginning, it was exclusively being used with the students for dispensing learning, running live classes, communicating with the students and so forth. As we continued using it, we found that we did have some limitations that we discovered that we wanted to, once we got the hang of it and the teachers were really using it to its fullest potential, wanting to record and capture some of those conference experiences so they could use them later so that they didn't have to reteach. The students could watch the videos and so forth after the fact. And we found that Schoology conferences was not really stepping up to the desired level of capabilities for recording, saving, and maintaining those recorded videos. So we also then started using Teams to supplement whenever we wanted to use video with the students. But one of the problems is that we have 16 different sending districts, and I can let Brett kind of talk about this a little bit more, but the different technologies being used with Teams versus the conferences kind of played better into one situation versus the other, depending upon the school district and what equipment those students had. And I know that Brett can kind of talk about that issue with dealing with the different 16 districts.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into a slide here where we're going to talk about that in a second. But just to kind of go off of what Mike had just said, we really use Teams more for a staff collaboration, at least at first. It then kind of migrated into some of what the teachers are using with students as well. But it was a collaboration tool because not every staff member was comfortable with Schoology or had even been able to get into Schoology at that point. So Office 365 was something that everybody had and had somewhat been trained on and used at one point or another. So were able to use Teams in order to at least get to that point where we could get them online and really kind of start communicating with them in a virtual environment.
All right, this is Kyle Weiler. I'm going to talk about some challenges we faced. As kind of Brett had talked about before, we've had some issues with devices and internet access. Brett was very capable and willing to reach out to the home schools for the most part. And dealing with 16 school districts, as we talked about, it can be a challenge, but he was able to kind of reach out to those technology people and kind of help us with that, because some of the stuff we were also finding out, some of the stuff that we needed our kids to be able to do was being blocked. So he's able to kind of reach out to those individuals and help us through that process. As far as internet access, that was also an issue and concern. And for those individuals that we had some issues and concerns with, once again, we either reached out to the homeschools, or Brett himself was able to basically be able to work that process through on our end. So it did come with a lot of challenges, and that was one of our biggest challenges. Our other concern was special ed, and how were we going to reach out to our special ed students at this point? And then we came up with this idea of using what we call our virtual LRC, which is our learning resource room. We used individuals in those classrooms and as well as our IAs to reach out to special ed students that needed individual work one-on-one. So we would set stuff up through teams where our IAs would reach out to our special ed students and work with them one-on-one to continue to provide them the education they needed and the repetition and retention that these individuals needed so much. We could do that with one-on-one through our teams process. Training in the virtual environment also was definitely something we talked about before. This is just, as a reminder, a lot of our staff members struggled with this at first, but as we started to train more and more, and as I said, Mike Stein and Brett were huge in this, and the trainings became to a point where they started getting comfortable with using a lot of this technology. It was amazing. Some of the faculty members we thought would never get to the point, they got there quickly, because I think the way we did it in small little chunks with videos provided them and meeting with them with their Schoology champions, it actually propelled them onto the next level. And I will tell you, most of these teachers you now talk to, they don't know how they didn't do this from the beginning. It's made their life so much easier as far as being able to teach within the virtual environment. We talked about down the road how this could lead to other enrichment or snow days. We can use these kinds of things to do these things to continue to provide great education towards our students with being able to do this in a virtual world. As far as professional development, we did have Microsoft Office 365 training throughout. Mike Stein has been huge in this aspect of training and teaching, as well as Brett Adams. We have set out various days they work, and we continue to train them in 365. Things are being updated all the time. And as Mike talked about before, basically 365 is kind of the avenue we've chosen. It's a much better process for our teachers to use that process in the aspect of doing everything virtually through Office. As we talked about with Schoology, the conferencing, not a lot of the teachers are really into that. It's the Microsoft Office has been a whole lot better process for us as far as doing stuff virtually. And once again, Schoology training has been the same thing. We've had our Schoology champions, Mike, Brett. We constantly meet. Jen Ron. We meet on a constant basis and continue to train. All of our in-services have a little bit of training here and there. Once again, we record all of our stuff so teachers can go back and actually see trainings and they can review them whenever they need to at this point. And training on how to teach an online environment has also been interesting. Once again, we've set up some time along with our coaches to kind of show them and explain to them how to teach through the online environment. And the other thing that we've seen a lot of is a lot of these instructors have been very good at going beyond and above and doing things that you never thought they would be able to do. So we actually use our own teachers to train other teachers and some of the things that are working for them. So showcasing our talents has been a great thing in a lot of our in-services, because teachers are seeing what they're capable of doing and they want to do what their peers are doing. So it actually has been an amazing thing to see these teachers and how they've continued to thrive through this whole virtual world. And we've also were able to add Act 80 days to our we actually have 5 of them. We actually put 3 of those on beginning of this school year to incorporate all these different kinds of trainings that we've talked about, whether it be Office 365, whether it be Schoology, how to use cameras. You know, the Act 80 days have actually been big saviors to us because it gave us more time to use as training towards our instructors.
All right, so and again, we've talked quite a bit about the designing of professional development and how we would get input from our staff. So we will very typically run, you know, surveys at the end of professional development, you know, things you want to know more about, things that you really enjoyed, things that weren't so well received. And we really take and scrutinize that feedback. Berks Career and Technology Center really relies very heavily on a lot of data use. We also run professional development process management teams throughout the year, which is a small group of staff that we pull together and kind of get their ideas and pick their brain of what they're seeing within the classrooms and things that they're hearing from colleagues as far as what professional development they would want to see and where they feel like they're lacking and really want to learn more about. So we really are heavily involved with using data to align our professional development. And talking a little bit about that and kind of going off some of the Act 80 stuff that Mr. Fulweiler was just talking about, what we did this year was we embedded 5 Act 80 days, and we had 2 of them scheduled to be right before Thanksgiving. And we are scheduled to open on August 24th for the first day of students, and we had 2 professional development days prior to that. On August 21st, we changed our delivery model, and the schools in Berks County were making a lot of adjustments as far as when they were bringing students in and pushing back the start of the school year. So literally about 3 days before school started, we changed everything. We moved the 2 Act 80 days that were originally scheduled for the Monday and Tuesday prior to Thanksgiving and put them on to the 24th and 25th of August, therefore giving us 4 professional development days in the beginning of the school year and pushing the start of the school year back for students 2 additional days. And what we did with that was we went right back to the well, and we went back to the professional development process management team, looked to see what they suggestions that they had feedback from the end of the year, and also in collaboration with our Schoology champions, and put together a menu-based in-service. And I believe Mike Stein's going to talk a little bit about that shortly. For our staff, where they were able to, again, go and select what they felt they needed the most training in to get ready for what was going to be a very interesting start to the school year. So with that, there is a question in the chat that's actually going to tie into this. I'm going to ask Mike Stein to address it. The question is, when you first looked at using a specific program, did you compare the various programs like Google Classroom? If so, what did you find different that compelled you to go with Teams instead of Classroom? And I know Mike was very heavily involved with the whole process with Schoology from the beginning. Mike?
Yeah, probably about 5 years ago, we started the journey of looking into getting into a learning management system and some sort of unified same system for all teachers to be able to communicate with the students and provide curriculum and content. And we did look at Google Classroom. We looked at Canvas. We looked at Schoology. There were a number of different learning management systems that we were identifying as potential suitors for what we were trying to accomplish. And at the time, we kind of grounded ourselves onto Schoology for the learning management system. Now, in this particular question, I think it's asking why necessarily Teams versus Google Classroom from the, I'm assuming the video side and then the communication, but we also looked at trying to use Office 365 in lieu of Google as our kind of communication platform and our kind of backbone behind the scenes with the Schoology product, simply because at the time we had more of a vested interest into the Office 365 suite of tools that we were using in the classrooms. A lot of the curriculum was in some of our technology-based and business classrooms and everything else were teaching the Microsoft suite of tools for their professions. So it lended in a direction, besides the other things in the back end, like IT wise, they were looking at security protocols and different things in regards to how we set up our backbone of our actual email and file server system. So all of our stuff is authenticated and run by the Office suite in the background. So, I mean, Brett can talk about that a little bit about the Azure and the system that we actually use to manage all of our email accounts, because each student gets their own email account and everything else. And we just kind of went that direction back at that time. If you were to reevaluate it now, again, it's something where just like the learning management system, we are using Schoology. Other schools use Canvas or are looking at other things. It really has to come down to your local population of your students, your staff, and the needs and what they know. At the time when we were looking at Schoology versus something like Google Classroom or other LMSs, we had taken into account our 16 districts, and about at the time, about 6 or 7 of them were using Schoology already, versus Canvas, there was only one using it, and Google Classroom, which is really was not at the time a full-blown, it really isn't still yet, a full-blown LMS that we were able to integrate into our student information system, which was Classmate. So I don't know if there's anything else beyond that. Dr. Stauffer, if you want to take over, and we're getting into training.
Sure, absolutely. So we've kind of covered some of this already, but again, just kind of going back and looking what that training looked like. We did have 3 days of very intensive Schoology training. We, discussed how we, assign those roles, how we broke them out into level of ability with Schoology, and really were able to target that training with them. In addition to that, like any good PD, it can't just stop, at the end of that. So there was ongoing spring semester support. So we had individual support and coaching. Mike Stein and also Rochelle Rudy, our 2 instructional coaches, were really integral in supporting our staff with that. Mike Stein is our technology integration coach, would be holding regular meetings for staff and open meetings where they could just jump on Microsoft Teams at a predetermined time every day. And it was really just kind of an open forum, open questions and discussion, new things that we were finding out, and sharing that information out during those. We would also, again, have regular check-ins with our Schoology champions, with our mentors in the building, our faculty mentors. And again, what are they hearing? What do they need? What does the staff need? And really kind of continuing to build and target PD to very specific people throughout this. One thing that we really got away from was really creating generic professional development and really targeting to the specific needs of either small groups of faculty or individualized when at all possible. And then finally, one of the things that we found very useful that we really kind of just stumbled on, to be quite honest, was we would run these sessions called administrative Q&As. And it was just basically a question and answer session. In the very beginning, they were held every single day. By the end of the school year, we had whittled them back to 2 times a week. And what they were strictly voluntary, and we would have a very large portion of our faculty would join these. But at 3 o'clock every day, all the admin were on a predetermined channel on Microsoft Teams, and everyone just log in. And any questions they had, any frustrations they had, things that they were dealing with in their classroom, it was an open forum to share all that. And then we would, respond as best we could right then and there. Or then what we would do is go back and get some answers and then get back to the entire group. That turned out to be really, really valuable. And we are continuing to do those to this day. Now, right now, since we are running like a high flex model, what we are doing is only holding them once every 2 weeks, because we are in the building right now. We are seeing teachers in person, but we still hold those at least once every 2 weeks, and still get some really great questions. And it really helps us keep a pulse on, what was going on at the time, because again, you don't have that personal connection with your staff. And, having that ability to meet with them at a predetermined time every day really allowed us to do that, and was very, 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 very valuable.
Also
So
say,
then,
Mike, we also had check-ins daily. Admin team would meet with all teachers every week. We would check in at least once a week and then go over any concerns or questions. And we as an admin team would come back with some concerns we had from the staff members. But we were constantly checking on them, seeing what they needed, sharing things that we saw from other things. I mean, that was the most important thing, is sharing what we saw with them, and those individuals could reach out to those other individuals. So as Mike talked about, I think the most important thing here was, allowing them to kind of work and, kind of play with it a little bit, have some questions, concerns. If we couldn't answer it right away, we take it back to the admin team, the coaches, and figure out how we can make it work, and they get back to them, and constantly supplying them back with feedback is extremely important in making this work.
Yeah, and throughout that process, as an instructional coach, I held daily 1 hour question and answer sessions every morning prior to the day starting. So if teachers were working on something or they were doing something and preparing for the day, they had the ability to get answers and questions dealt with prior to going into the class day.
All right, Brett, can you go to the next slide?
Mike, did you want to talk a little bit about this? I know you were really integral in delivering these.
Yeah, as everything kind of happened over the spring, and then we started looking at fall, and we knew that we were coming into fall likely in a somewhat online, potentially in-person environment. We wanted to try and prepare everyone as much as we could over the summer to get ready for what we were going to encounter in the fall. So administratively, we approached the administration and we asked if we could get some professional development time set aside over the summer for all of our instructors to kind of yet again continue to prepare for what they're going to be encountering when they come into the fall. If you've experienced any of this and looked at it from the teacher's perspective, teaching virtually is a different set of hurdles than teaching in person, and teaching in hybrid or concurrently with online learning is even more different than the other two. So over the summer, we started to identify and prepared some topics that we worked with all of the instructors on to get ready for the fall. And some of those things were simple housekeeping issues like closing out the school year from 2019-20 to preparing the 2020-21 school year in Schoology and getting everything set up. For many of our instructors, this was a new process because at the time, as was talked about earlier, we only had about 50% of the instructors using Schoology during the beginning of 2019. So there was a lot to learn, even from transitioning from one school year into the next. And that had a lot to do with organizing the curriculum, how they were going to plan on dispensing learning guides through the curriculum with Schoology, and how we were able to tie into our student information system. One of the other things that really hasn't been mentioned yet is that we actually, unfortunately, you can't plan the pandemic, but we had decided earlier in the summer of 2019, we were going to be transitioning to a new student information system. So we actually ended our current student information system in 2020 spring, and we went into a new one this fall. So on top of everything else that was going on, we had to get everyone prepared for and understand how to use a new student information system, in addition to everything that was going on with all their learning and training. So we spent the summer working with everyone to get everyone up to speed on how we're going to be using the new SIS with Schoology, and how that was going to dump grades down into the system and auto grade things, and so they could fully understand how everything was going to fold out in the fall. As we got into the fall and where we are now, we continue to do a lot of ongoing technology support and looking at where the needs are and where we're addressing things. And because of the way that the school year now has kind of fallen into place here in the fall, there's with the hybrid learning and the concurrent learning and everything else, the students are and the teachers are pretty busy on Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays. And on Wednesdays, we're pretty much almost at 100% virtual with all of our students. And it allows the teachers to have some time to create some asynchronous material that they can have up online and the students can work on. And they can spend some time with us on Wednesdays as the technology coaches to get more training and work with us to try and prepare for what might be the next week's worth of content. So even today, for instance, I have a group of culinary instructors that are out here working on curriculum with us to try and prepare for things as we continue to migrate into the new student information system and connect all of the curriculum connective tissue from Schoology into the SIS so they can continue teaching in a seamless environment here in this online hybrid concurrent learning environment. I think
All
we
right,
might
so the next one we kind of want to just jump into, and we've said it a lot, is communicate, communicate, communicate. You certainly cannot over communicate in a situation like this. And I think one of the things that really helped us was, you know, there's going to be times that you fail and you're going to fall flat on your face, and they're going to be epic. And you know, have fun with that and address that and acknowledge it, learn from it, and move on. You know, we did an awful lot of that in the very beginning of this because there were things that we tried that just didn't work. And you know, we had processes, we had procedures, and that we thought were so well thought out, and you know, they fell short very, very quickly. So you know, we learned a lot from that and moved on. But you know, certainly, you know, acknowledge that and have a little fun with it. One thing we definitely learned throughout this was, you know, the level of stress that everybody is under with something like this because it is so brand new. So if you do have an opportunity to kind of learn from something and, you know, maybe laugh at it a little bit in the meantime, to do that. You know, there's only so many things that we can control. But then again, when you do have those successes, like absolutely celebrate them. Again, I think that's something that really went a long way with the staff. One of the things we would do is every Wednesday we'd kind of send a hump day message out to them, and it would have, like, you know, maybe an inspiring video or a meme or something funny, you know, just something to kind of pick their spirits up. Because again, we're not in the building and we're not able to kind of check in with everybody each day, but just having that little bit of you know, something to take the stress away, or you know, to lift spirits a little bit was very, very helpful and meaningful for that. And again, just really leveraging social media. I know you hear it time and time and time again, but most of our kids were getting their information through our Twitter feed. You know, we were posting a lot of things on the website, wasn't getting nearly as many hits as our Twitter feed was, and we were also using Instagram and Facebook. Mr. Follard, did you want to talk a little bit about the client surveys and how we do those?
Sure. Basically, once again, we talked about this a little earlier. We sent out a lot of surveys out to our teachers and support staff and students, making us aware of concerns they have on their end, things that went well, things that didn't go well. I think that's extremely important. We collect those surveys and then we use that to build on for the next and upcoming school year every year. I mean, it's extremely important for us in our data. As far as the daily admin questions and answer sessions, it definitely was optional, but as Dr. Sloffer had stated, it was very, very important because there was things that were coming from them that we had no idea. There was concerns. We could kind of step back as an admin team and kind of take a look over how we could fix these things. As I said before, very important was our technology staff, Brad Adams and Mike Stein, and even Jen Ron. They were extremely important to us in how we could figure concerns out technology-wise. They are very instrumental in making this all work out. As far as the educational plan, we can constantly revise and share that with faculty and students and parents. It's something definitely that is always evolving and changing, and we constantly update that through our website. We send a lot of school messages out, letting our faculty, students, and even the parents aware of all the changes that are constantly happening at this point.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fulweiler. So again, I know Mr. Fulweiler talked a little bit about the continuity of education plan, and again, that was something that we, you know, started very, very early on in building, and we continue to edit that to this day. We just had new edits made 2 days ago to that, and really what it does is it really kind of creates like a roadmap for the staff to follow, for the students to follow, for the parents to follow. Everybody knows what the expectations are, And a lot of the topics that are in our continuity of education plan were topics that were derived out of that admin Q&A, where we were seeing that this was a much more global issue and wasn't just, in one classroom or two classrooms. Like, this was something that was really affecting the whole organization. So we built a lot of those processes and pieces of information into our continuity of education plan, and again, continue to develop and update that to this day. And each time there is an update, it is put on our website and then also shared with our faculty. And because I think that we had so much, collaboration with our staff, throughout this whole process, this was very, very far from a top-down initiative. This was really kind of grassroots and built from the staff with an awful lot of ideas and suggestions on how to improve what we were doing. Came from them. That buy-in really wasn't an issue. I mean, they are 100%, they have 100% bought in to, what we're trying to accomplish, and, really just trying to deliver the best education in a virtual environment as possible. And again, we've talked earlier, but we are at 100% of our faculty using Schoology right now, and we're looking to close out that 3-year school improvement plan in just over a year. So just
Excuse
talking.
me. Oh, I'm sorry. I see you have 4 more questions in the Q&A. Would you like to take some time to answer those now, or
Sure, we can do that
for a little while?
Sure.
Okay.
Mike, did you want to take the first one?
I was kind of looking to try and wrap all them up in one answer, because they're getting a couple of similar questions, or more the technology side about things that we use with the LMS. So when it comes to some of the differences and the things that we use Schoology versus one of the questions here is Canvas, what are the major differences? For the most part, both of the systems are going to be very similar. The questions are disappearing. Hold on a second. The systems are very similar in the way that they operate and the way that they deliver the content. I did some collaboration with some other schools and talked about the differences between Canvas and Schoology. And for the most part, they're so similar in some of the things and the features that they do. It's kind of like almost the Coke and Pepsi debate from going back and when they were doing all that, like which is better, Coke or Pepsi. It starts off, I think, with what it is you seem to gravitate toward and what it was that was a system that worked for you. But for us, it really started off with, and at the time, Schoology had some better features that Canvas did not. Schoology had the ability at the time to do standards integration and tracking. Now it doesn't pass it over to the SIS, but it did have the ability to integrate some of the what they called learning objectives, that you could create and import standards into the assignments so that you could track whether or not the assignments were meeting and what the students were achieving with some of the standards. Canvas has now also brought that on board, and they've introduced that a couple of years ago. But for the most part, I would, as I suggested to other schools, look at it from the standpoint of surveying the districts that you serve and see what those students are already using, because that saved us a lot of time when it came to what you would call training the students that come into the school. So we didn't have to spend as much effort in trying to get the students acclimated to the way that we are doing things if we were using a learning management system that was off-brand, if you will, from what they were typically using in their sending district. And some of the things that we have experience with and Schoology, and we witnessed that in the spring with other LMSs, is that everybody went online in such a rush in the spring, and some of that is actually still having some reverberations here in the fall, that the systems are being taxed. So all of the LMS systems are working on expanding out their capabilities. We watched some of these issues with Schoology where we were losing connectivity, and some things that were occurring in the ability for Schoology to process grades and get things done. And some of this stuff kind of hit some lapses where things weren't getting processed in the normal amount of time, and they would notify everyone, and things were running a little bit slower because of the large amount and volume of materials that were being processed, and a number of students that were using the system. In the spring, from what I was reading, they basically doubled their user count or capacity that was taxing the system when everyone went virtual. And they're still going through some of those growing pains, just like many of the other technical issues that are around serving online content when it comes to bandwidth and user traffic. And we were witness things during certain parts of the day when other schools would be basically waking up, going across the country, and some of the time kind of getting knocked off, and students being able to stay online and so forth. So kind of getting around all those things, we had to work with the teachers and get the materials out to the students so that they could work independently as well when it comes to some of the assignments. So the more and more we build up the curriculum so that it didn't have to be entirely in person, where they could be working on something in the meantime if something did happen, were some of the things that we had to work out to get around some of the latency issues and the downtime with the systems. Just trying to catch up with some questions here. Dr. Stauffer, do you have any stats on the percentage of attendance that we had with the students? I think at this point now we're basically running as though it's a normal school year when it comes to attendance, but over in the springtime, do you have any information on that?
So in the springtime, we were running still about 80 to 85% of regular attendance during that. Now, with our attendance being down on a good year, on a regular year, our attendance is anywhere from 92 to 94% average daily attendance. So when you look at it and say the attendance was down, I'm not necessarily sure it was because lessons were recorded. I think more of it was because they're home, and getting them to log into a virtual session just wasn't something that they all wanted to do, and we still struggle with that right now. But attendance is done a lot differently right now for us. Part of that is because we do count attendance. We do have a virtual attendance option this time around coming into the fall, which is something we did not have available in the spring. We were more or less taking attendance at that point just to kind of see where we were, and so we had information to share with our JOC as far as the success of our students logging in and what was getting completed. But attendance is handled a lot differently now. I see another question down there regarding synchronous or asynchronous teaching. So right now our instructors are doing kind of all of that. We just recently changed our plan to go virtual Wednesdays. So right now we have been open 5 days a week. We have 16 different sending schools. Those 16 schools, when you add all of them up, we have about 35 different groupings of students that come to us. And that's because of the 16 sending schools. Some of them are dividing their alphabet in half. They're dividing their alphabet in half different ways. They're running their own A/B schedules. Some of them are running 4 days on, 6 days off. So our teachers are kind of managing all of that with all three levels of that as well. So what that entails is, in order to keep any kind of curriculum moving forward, there has got to be some component of synchronous instruction going on. So typically what you will see is when a teacher is doing a theory lesson, they're using their camera that Brett has talked about. The students are then up on the screen, and the students in the class and that are virtual are all interacting with one another and with the instructor during that lesson. When we move to the virtual Wednesdays, there'll be some virtual and live instruction. One of the purposes for that was to give a little bit more opportunity for our teachers to do some more one-on-one or small group instruction with the class, because what we're seeing is a large number of students that where their grades where their grades have fallen off a little bit. Sorry, I need to get a drink. Compared to where they were last year. So that's going to give them an opportunity to do that, and then also to plan, because right now they don't have an opportunity to plan for all these different models of instruction that they're delivering.
There's a couple of more questions in here about attendance, and I'd like to speak to one of them here about, do we have attendance issues because of recording lessons and the students then not wanting to participate in the class room at this point? So what is actually more the standard is what's happening is The teachers are doing live instruction, and then they're recording that live instruction and putting that up. And it's more of an item that or a situation where the students are looking and watching the recorded videos post lesson. So the attendance expectation is that they're supposed to be in attendance during class and participating in class. The recordings that are currently happening are recording what's happening live and are becoming remediation tools or things for students that were absent for whatever reason that may have been. It is more to recap and reteach than it is to provide in the moment learning with the students.
Thanks, Mike. And there's another one on there as far as regarding our attendance policy doing virtual. So our students are expected to log in and be participating in the class during their scheduled session. So we are a half-day model. So we do have an AM group of students and a different PM group of students that do show up for us. So basically what happens is when they log in, they're expected to be in and participating with their class and with their instructor during that assigned time. Now, again, that was something that we learned in the spring, that coordination was not worked out with the 16 different sending schools, and it was kind of like a free-for-all, and we were really struggling to really nail down a time for our students where they could just focus on BCTC work. So we have certainly worked all that out over the summer. We coordinated all that with the sending school superintendents and principals, and again, do have dedicated time for that. So if they are an AM student, their time from 7:45 to 11 is dedicated to BCTC work. And then that's how we handle the attendance. And we do have a code that is remote instruction present. So they're counted as being in the class and participating in the class, but not necessarily in the building. And that's how we are separating the two. So I know we are getting close on time. Does anybody have any other further questions? You can always take a look at our website to see our plan. If that's something you want to see, you could email any one of us. We'd be happy to share any of the resources that we have, or even speak with you one-on-one and just kind of share some stories of some of the things we overcame and how we overcame them. But again, this is just one way of doing that. We're again hoping to learn in the next couple days, from all of you and the different things that you're doing at your schools.